Well, as Father Zadig will no doubt affirm, clergy never mind following lesser orators. And rumors from last Thursday's debates leave me feeling relatively well positioned today. There is nothing quite so endearing as Watch Hill hospitality, and as I arrived Thursday evening at Marga and Thomas Lips, they assured me we did not need to watch the debates. We had plenty to catch up on. And I arrived to find a Mexican flag flying on their porch. And I have enjoyed boating and soirees and swimming pools and jacuzzis and Marga's Lobster. They are incredibly hospitable people, and equally hospitable in San Miguel de Allende, though it isn't my place to say, come on down. There's a story of a young American tourist in London, and he decided he wanted to experience real British culture, which he heard resided in the pubs. So he headed out after lunch, and he goes to every pub in sight, tasting the local beers, chatting up the lads and lasses. But then, back out on the streets, he discovers that public restrooms aren't really a British priority. And so, in desperation, he taps a bobby on the shoulder and explains his situation. Well, right this way, sir, says the policeman, opens a gate and lets him into the most beautiful gardens the American has ever seen, with fountains and manicured lawns and hydrangeas to rival Watch Hills. And the American does what he must, and as he leaves, he asks the policeman, British hospitality? And the bobby looks down his nose at the young American and says, French embassy. Now, last Sunday, we had a long reading this Sunday. Thank you. Very well done. Last Sunday, Jesus calms a terrifying storm on Lake Galilee in order to cross from Jewish territory into Gentile territory, which he wasn't supposed to do at that age and time, particularly as a rabbi. You're not supposed to mix it up with the Gentiles. His disciples were probably concerned about his reputation, probably about their own reputations as well, proceeding in such an unseemly manner into Gentile territory. And folk in the Decapolis offered Jesus less hospitality than Marga and Tom offered me. They give Jesus a mixed welcome. After Jesus heals the Gerasene demoniac, sending demons into a herd of pigs who run off a cliff, the pig farmers beg him to leave ASAP. This Jewish interloper is ruining the local economy, and it would take a long while to breed another herd of pigs that large. And the word beg used here in Greek is parakaleo, and it's used 3 times in that story. The demons begged Jesus not to send them out of the country. The owners of the herd begged Jesus to leave, and the former demoniac begs to go with Jesus wherever it is that he might be going. So Jesus, perhaps feeling that he is not entirely welcome, decides to cross the Galilee once more and head home. And he no sooner gets out of the boat on home turf when he is begged parakaleo again, this time by a prominent and influential local leader named Jairus, who has a daughter near death. These contrasting reactions to Jesus are repeated many times in the Gospel of Mark. Some people are determined to get rid of Jesus as fast as they can, and some are willing to push through any barrier to get near to him. The people who dig through a neighbor's roof in order to lower their paralyzed friend to Jesus are in the second group. So is the Syrophoenician woman who begs and goes on begging Jesus to heal her daughter even after Jesus' curt dismissal. Blind Bartimaeus shouts his lungs out as everyone tries to shut him up. And today we hear of two more people who will jump any barrier to approach the Lord. Jairus is a leader of the synagogue, and he has a reputation to uphold. And Jesus hasn't exactly curried establishment favor. Jairus and Jesus shouldn't be seen together according to the local social registry. And Jairus is begging Jesus for help and asking Jesus to come to his house. And he's doing this in front of God and all the neighbors. And the woman with the flow of blood is restricted by Jewish law from any human contact. She is not allowed to enter the synagogue to worship. She is not supposed to be out in a crowd. Her hemorrhage has been going on for 12 years, and she is, according to Old Testament law, unclean. She is a source of defilement. She is Typhoid Mary and has no business pressing through a crowd to clutch at Jesus' cloak. And yet, there she is. We are told that she has endured much under many physicians and had spent all her money in search of health. There may be some here who can relate today to that. A tragic accident at a healthcare conference finds several healthcare professionals queuing up at the same time at the pearly gates. What area of healthcare were you involved in? St. Peter asked the first. Well, I worked in a community health clinic in an impoverished neighborhood, responds the woman. Excellent, said St. Peter. Enter thou into thy heavenly reward. And you? Peter asked the second. Well, I spent my life in nursing, said the man, caring for the suffering in many hospital rooms. Excellent, says St. Peter. Enter thou into thy heavenly reward. And you, says St. Peter, turning to the third man, well, I spent my life administering an HMO plan. And Peter turns to his computer, intensely working the keyboard, and finally says, I have good news. I think I can get you into heaven for 3 days. Some things never change. The Jewish Talmud prescribes 11 different cures for that poor woman's disease. One was to drink a goblet of wine containing a powder made from rubber, alum, and crocuses, which would ruin a good Cabernet Sauvignon. Another was to carry the ashes of an ostrich egg in a linen bag throughout the summer. She was much afflicted by her HMO. Jairus and the woman are united in desperation. They are willing to break the rules, perhaps because they have no options. The truest test of faith, says St. Mark, is whether you will let anything stand between you and God. And so Jairus and the ill woman become boundary crossers. Jesus is willing to bend the rules to allow the reign of God into the world, and these folk are ready to bend the rules to find that God. Jesus goes against convention for the sake of the kingdom. He flouts the purity code. He brushes aside distinctions of class and gender and religion. So perhaps we also, as Christians from a variety of backgrounds, should expect and prepare to welcome people who are looking for Jesus. Some have visited churches that bear his name, and they have decided he is not inside. And perhaps it might be better to represent the Savior who loves fiercely and speaks sharply, who startles us with the magnitude of his grace and forgiveness. All people, without regard for class or station or nation of origin, all who are driven to breach the barriers in search of a real encounter with the living God, should find welcome. Folk will come looking for the Jesus who makes them cry in church, not out of sadness, but because after long years they've brushed up against him and felt something inside begin to heal. Christ insisted in his ministry that the spiritual realm holds sway over the physical. The two realms aren't divorced, but the physical does not receive top billing. Heard in our post-Enlightenment and materialistic culture, that can be a little jarring, the message of the kingdom come. C.S. Lewis once said that good doctors know that they are only conduits allowing the body's recuperative powers to work. No cut can be healed in a corpse, Lewis wrote. All who are cured by God, in the sense that their tissues are repaired by the far descending energy which, flowing from God, energizes the whole system of nature. And so the best physicians know their part of a larger mystery. And if that larger mystery is acknowledged, Christ's acts are given context. Brush up against that Christ, and healing begins deep down, where body and soul find conjunction. And so much of Jesus' ministry was just to pull back the curtain, a reminder of human dependence on God. And we are meant, in our turn, to pull back the curtain for others. When Jesus arrived at Jairus' house, people snickered. We imagine that first century folk were much more naive than they were, but they had no expectation that the child's corpse would reanimate. Dead was dead, and they pretty much knew that. Jesus puts them out, and he goes to the child and says, "Talitha kum," which means get up. And the child does. That's a word the authentic Jesus still speaks. God may come to you in a place that has been dead for a long while, or to a place within you where you have never been fully alive. You may not have been alive to your own power and potential. Maybe you've been like Jairus or that woman with a hemorrhage, too much defined by outside forces. And that may be the place where God is saying to you today, not just rouse, not just stir around on your cot for a while, but get up and walk around and have something to eat and live as though God has touched you. And maybe you think you burned too many bridges, made too many poor decisions, or that you are too young to unleash your potential, though if we're honest, most of us here today are thinking we are perhaps too old for any change. Maybe after long years of trying everything else, you need to elbow forward and brush against the hem of Christ's garment and beseech Christ to the place of your deepest need. For Jairus, at least, and for that woman, there was a whiff of desperation to their faith. We are all desperate for what God alone can do. And all around that little girl were people who had given up on her. And all around us are people the world has given up on and written off. And our task is to write them back into the human narrative. Get up, love your neighbor, share your bread, touch the leper, tear aside the curtain. And there were plenty of voices beside Christ in that room with the young girl's corpse, mocking voices that would have kept her dead. And those voices are to be found also in the house of your own soul. There is no God, say such voices. What you see is what you get. The fate of the poor is beyond your concern. Your life makes no difference. Get up, Christ says to you. Now is the time to contend and to strive, to persevere, and to beseech, sometimes in unseemly ways, to hope wildly, and reach out for the hem of Christ's garment. Get up. Get up and walk around and have something to eat and live in ways that show that God has touched you and that there are those that we will be sent through these doors in our own turn to touch.